Any questions?
Francis, my question is about perception. So, if I look at clouds coming by on a summer's afternoon and just relax my vision, I start to see like shapes like faces and dragons and witches on broomsticks and all these amazing things, and I can see them really vividly in the clouds. So my question is, does the mind do that with this reality that we're perceiving now in the same way? Is that a similar imagination, or is that something different?
I don't see your rephrase your question. I understand what you do when you look at the clouds and when you see the witches and so on.
Yeah.
But that I understand because we have all of us done that.
Yeah.
Actually, there is. I made a copy of a Turner painting on pastel, and when Jean Klein came to my place, he saw it and said, "Francis, you did that." He said, "That's great." And then he said, "Oh, did you notice the head in the sky?" So I had painted the head in the sky without noticing it. You know, he noticed, but then now that he says, "Yeah, perhaps there is a head in the sky." Well, I bring the painting so that you can all see whether you see a head in the sky. So anyway.
So when I see these heads or witches, they seem very real. Like I
mean, I don't know what you had smoked on the grass.
I know where you're going with the real. Well, there is something in me that knows it's illusionary. That's what the process is. It's illusionary. It's fun. There is something that recognizes that.
Yeah, we have a form recognition software in the brain that tries to match what we see with forms that we have in our database. So then, when something looks close, then the brain says, "Oh, witch," but. It doesn't have much to do, I think, with what we talk about here.
Well,
I mean, I'm not seeing what you're driving at.
My question was about imagination. So that process is imagination. And I can do that process in my mind. That's imagination. It feels like I can recall music that I've heard.
Yeah.
And listen to it.
Yeah.
And that would be under the realm of imagination, in the sense there's a reality to it, but there's also illusion to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this world that I'm experiencing now through the perceptions also has a small similarity to, it feels like if I, for example, keep my eyes open for a long period of time, the saturation of light starts to really distort the visual image that I'm seeing. So my question is about your perception. So you said that you have the same imaginings, see the witches and things as before, but you're also perceiving right now. There is a 100% assertion that the the perceiving that's happening now is reality.
That which perceives is real.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that there is perceiving is real. What we perceive is more, is not as real as the fact that there is perceiving.
And would you call that intelligence?
What would I call intelligence?
The perceiving.
Well, that which perceives is also that which understands. Right? We don't have two different me or selves, one that perceives and one that understands. It is the same consciousness that perceives and understands. So, therefore, it is both the perceiving, but it is also the understanding, therefore, intelligence. It is also the same consciousness that beholds, that contemplates, so that sees beauty, that reacts to beauty, and it is the same also that loves. So love, intelligence, beauty are not qualities of the object that is being beheld, but rather of the beholder, of the consciousness.
Because when I see something beautiful, it sort of catches me by surprise, and then in a way it sort of disappears. The more I look for it, the more it disappears.
There is a difference between the beautiful and beauty. You see, beauty is an experience. Beautiful is an object that we contemplate that takes us to the experience of beauty. And in the experience of beauty, there is no division, there is no separation. And then that's why the experience of beauty is happy. It's very difficult to distinguish between love, happiness, beauty, because they are the same light. There are different frequencies of the same light.
As an experiment, I can be open to the possibility that, for instance, I share the same consciousness as everyone in this room, but it also feels like there's a slight effort involved in doing that. So is that an experiment that's worth kind of like living with and...
Well, perhaps you are not conducting the experiment the way I would suggest for you to conduct it. Because the way I would suggest to conduct it doesn't require any effort, provided we don't have any misgivings regarding our desire to conduct it. In other words, provided our desire to conduct it is solid and we are completely open to the possibilities that consciousness is shared, right? So when that is the case, we don't need any manipulation, we don't need any doing, we don't need any effort. These simple, for instance, you are going to interact with someone and you connect with your openness to the possibility that you and that person share the same consciousness. You are completely open, and that's all that is needed. From that moment of openness to this possibility, whatever is going to ensue, the interaction is going to be established on this basis. It doesn't require any effort. And it will remain that way up until somehow you choose to go back into your shell. You see? And to say, oh no, I am separate, or to think, or to feel, to believe I am separate. Then it's your choice at that moment to cancel the experiment, so to speak. And of course, the sooner you cancel the experiment, the less magnificent the outcome of it. You see? So that's why in the beginning we may do the experiment for perhaps a few seconds, but then we start yelling at the person, and then you don't have a very harmonious conclusion.
Just as you said that, it feels like maybe it's actually a sensation in my almost at the head area that seems to be triggered, which I'm saying is effort.
Yeah. You don't need any sensation. All you need is this clarity that you are genuinely open to the possibility that you and that person share the same consciousness. The moment you are open to this possibility, it's like you have chosen a preference in your sub-menu. Right? You have chosen the preference universal consciousness, which is in fact the default on your application. But so, in other words, you have unchosen, unchecked the preference personal consciousness. And from that moment on, the application runs the way it should. Now, if at some point you go back to the sub-menu and you check again personal consciousness, then everything goes berserk.
So it's like an experiment, but it's really the natural thing.
And it's because it is a natural condition of consciousness. That's why it doesn't require any effort. And that's why in ignorance we try to manipulate it, we try to make it as an effort, but then we miss the mark. You see, that's why it's important to understand the simplicity of what I have just said. That all it takes is this initial moment of openness that unchecks the personal consciousness option, and then you will, sometimes when you have rechecked the personal consciousness, you don't notice it right away that you have rechecked it. You notice it a little too late. You have already punched the guy in the face. So then you say, oops, sorry, I didn't mean it. Here is my handkerchief. Blow your nose. So. Pas encore, attends, je vais joindre la conversation. Oui, mais alors là, I don't see her chat because she sends that to you and not to all. We have said send your question to all entire audience. So
she said the only option in the chat screen are organizers only, presenter only, or Francis Lucille. Can you make me the presenter? I don't understand.
no, you don't want to make her the presenter. Just she can send you the question to Francis Lucille and you will receive the question. Okay.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question to Hugh's comment or question. So I understand that you start by unchecking the personal option, and you check, like you said, the default is universal consciousness. And you said up until I choose or we choose to uncheck that, and then it goes in. But that choice to take the personal consciousness is really not done consciously.
Well, yes, it is. But you are so used to do it that it feels unconscious, but...
Yeah, so I need some help in this. So let's say I am having an interaction with someone, and to start off, I am in right space, and I say the consciousness in you and me is the same. And then down the line,
you notice, oops, I have been involved.
Yeah. So, but I haven't done it consciously. Now you are saying that I have.
Yeah, but you notice that you have been involved. So as you notice that you have been involved, you can always go back to an earlier moment when you were involved. Perhaps you don't remember the moment itself when you... But you can know that because of the fact that you are involved now and you were not involved when you unchecked the thing, at some point in between you have begun to be. So then what happens at that moment, you go back to consciousness universal. You resume the experiment, you see. And then what is going to happen is that you are going to, when you fall back into the personal option, you will fall into the option less often and for shorter durations, short over time. But what is important is as soon as you notice that you are on the personal mode, to immediately revert to the impersonal mode, and also to notice for how long, to trace back of the personal history that has led to the present moment, so that you come back to as far as you can remember how it happened, the etiology of the thing. Yeah. As far as you can. And then there is a moment you can go to the moment precisely when it stops.
When the shift happened,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you will notice the shift happens, and oops, you notice immediately, and you revert immediately.
Right, right. Thank you.
Francis, at the beginning, when I started coming, and you were talking about the impersonal and feeling that we're one, the mind had a different idea, which it seems now that it's much more simple than the idea that the mind had at that moment. And there is like a filter that comes, that is the personal. And it comes in front. Is that right?
I would call it rather a belief than a filter. A belief which also triggers a different mode of functioning. You function on the personal mode, so aggression, defense, turf protection. But the moment we are willing to conduct these experiments, we have there is a tremendous change that has happened in our life already. The simple fact that we are willing to conduct this experiment is an extraordinary revolution in our lives. So a lot changes in us and around us when we begin to do that already, because there has been a long preparation before we are open to doing that.
Sometimes it seems the opposite. It seems like it's easy to go back. Like
yes, but there is nobody who goes back. What is very important is when we realize I was back, not to judge yourself, but on the contrary, to congratulate yourself. I noticed it, so I'm not back. I'm back to where I belong, to where I am. In this not knowing, in this openness.
In that sense, this time during the yoga, it was interesting to see how, when we switch into the movement, how the option of going to the personal mood is there, and you can choose not to go there.
It's good to be not knowing, and also I think we all have had this experience, that we were damn certain about something, so attached to our certainty, and then that life has proven us completely wrong. You see, I'm absolutely certain I've left my keys there. One day we were driving at night with my teacher. We were going to a retreat in the French Alps, and I was navigating at the time. No navigator, it was the map and the compass. So the the Boy Scout in me and the former military guy, you know, I was very certain of my navigation skills, you know. And then we arrive at a fork on the road, you know, and my teacher says, it's on the left. And so because when I was driving him, he would always sleep. You know, sometimes, you know, he would, I mean, we were in the car for 5 minutes and boof. He would sleep. And sometimes when I was driving fast, he was driving fast. Sometimes in a curve, his head would bang. You know? So I thought, I mean, this guy has been sleeping, you know. And so I was pretty sure of my navigation. And then, you know, he said, well, he was not sure, you know, he was in not knowing. I was in knowing. So, of course, we did it my way, and we ended up nowhere, you know. And he didn't say, see, I told you so. No, because he let the lesson sink, you know. Slowly.
Thanks.
Francis? A couple of days ago, you were talking about the different types of meditation. I guess I had a couple of...
the different meanings of the word meditation in my book.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could clarify what is the correct way to contemplate. Let's say one is contemplating a divine quality, or earlier you mentioned contemplating beauty. And when I contemplate, it seems like I try to have a model about, let's say, the one, if I'm contemplating the oneness of being, there is some kind of model, but it's more like going into something about which there isn't much clarity, and there is some sort of waiting, going deeper and waiting.
That which triggers the contemplation is your interest. Which interest is another word for love. You see, enthusiasm, interest, they connect with love. So, if you're not interested, forget about it. You know, forget about contemplating. You know. So the first thing is a genuine interest, and in that which is being contemplated, without any ulterior motive. For instance, if I contemplate this, because then if I find the solution, I can show how good I am, you know, then you have how smart I am or how spiritual I am, then you have an ulterior motive. You are not contemplating because you are interested in the subject matter. So the first requirement, and almost the only requirement, is a genuine interest. And that's very difficult to ascertain. am I really having fun? Am I really interested? Yeah, some water would help. Thank you. Am I really interested? Because that is going to trigger the contemplation. Whatever it is that we are contemplating. And we contemplate only for as long as it lasts. That also is very important. We cannot maintain the contemplation if the interest goes away. The contemplation has stopped at that moment. That's why to follow your interest is the best recipe for real contemplation. And it requires some intelligence and some attention, because often we believe we do things not out of interest for doing the thing, but because we have an ulterior motive. For instance, let's say I go to a museum to see the Vermeers because I feel I have the project that seeing the Vermeers will make me happy. It's very different from having the desire to see the Vermeer. You see what I mean? To say, oh, for instance, oh, I've seen this, the view of Delft, you know, on a book, but it is somewhere in Den Haag. And so, and then there is this exhibition in town, and then there is an interest to see the real painting, to see the real masterpiece. That's different, you know. It's not to... For a truth seeker, the contemplation is, especially on this path, is the contemplation of ideas, you know, the ideas about the truth, about consciousness, about reality, about that we don't notice it perhaps in the beginning, but there is also a lot of perfume when we think about those topics in this freestyle, you see, freestyle, no constraint, just we follow the thought, because the thought invites us. We have to understand that freedom and enthusiasm are very important in those matters. No coercion, no I have to, no chore, no ulterior motive. If I pay my dues, then I will be a member of the club. No, this type of things.
Also, on the same note, when something beautiful appears, like a beautiful sunset, it is, what I experience is more and more is to just be captivated. It just appears that it is beautiful. There is no particular reason why that is. And I just try to stay with it as long as I can. And sometimes, once in a while, I stay there for long enough that I wonder, why can't I leave? Because it's sort of new to stay there. And I was wondering, because you mentioned it in the context of contemplation in an earlier question. And so in regards with beauty, is it just to be taken by it and to stay with it?
Yes, to be open, to let beauty come to you, and not try to grab it. You see, it's the same thing in relationships. You know? When there is true love, each of the partners, in fact, let the other come. And they meet, although nobody moves. Whereas if one tries to grab, it creates some resistance on the other side. So this openness is very important in all aspects of our life. For instance, I observe people in museums, they go there to, especially with the guided tours. And there is this guide, you know, and they go there to accumulate information, you know, when the painter was born, who is the lady in the painting, why did he paint the painting, and observe this and observe that. And at the end, when they come out of it, what they have is a lot of new concepts in their head. So whereas when I go to a museum, I kind of know what I'm going to look at least the painters, and I walk past a lot of paintings without even looking at them, because I want to have my eyes fresh, you see? And then I sit in front, if possible, if there is a bench, you know, and so then I let the thing come to me. It's the same thing with music. You need to let the music come to you. You don't want to grab every note. That's the beauty with music. You don't need to grab every note. You need to let the notes come to you, and at some point you're cooked. You see, you are not a recording device that has to later on give back the entire concerto. All it takes is one moment of beautiful expression to take you to the emotion. It's the same thing here, actually. You don't need to understand everything which is said and to try to grab and grasp everything. It's better in this contemplation to be open and not to focus. And then you will see, sometimes you will listen to the sound of the voice, sometimes to your own thought, and sometimes something which is said will come to you and then will touch you. Because what is important is this moment when we are touched. The rest is just a preparation for these moments.
Thank you.
At the times when I hit roadblocks in, say, the somatic kind of meditations that we do, any time that the instruction is given, perceive the totality of your experience and welcome all of it. There are different ways that I get hung up when I do get hung up, but it seems like the primary one is the fact that because the sensations in my body, I mean, I only recently, since I started seeing Rupert and you, started actually perceiving sensations with any kind of clarity and actually receiving them. So there's a tendency when I'm trying to just feel the whole situation as one thing, to get caught up on individual sensations because they're more vivid than they've ever been before. And I think the answer, I was just going to ask you, for a tip of, how to, I've been trying to formulate this question for 3 years. And seriously, and it almost seems like your answer to Kenan, it was part of the answer to this question, but it's a repeated issue.
It requires the understanding that there is nothing to expect from the sensations. That's very important. Nothing to expect from the sensations. And for instance, to maintain a sensation, to change, to transform a sensation, or to dissolve, make disappear a sensation, is not to deliver what you seek, the peace you seek. In other words, every time we tend to focus on sensations because we expect either usually to change them or to eliminate them. And what I call the transparency is not at all the elimination of the sensation, of the existing sensations. But it's the zooming out from all of them. What I say is to contemplate, to welcome with benevolent indifference. Every word is important. Indifference is crucial. If you try to manipulate, if you are busy with any sensation, it means you are not indifferent. Right? And the indifference applies to all the perceptions. In the case in point, the bodily sensations, obviously. You see. So you have to allow for them to tell their story, not to coerce them to be silent, but at the same time, you don't care about what they say. You see, it's like people, they are boring and they speak all the time. You see, and they say things that are not interesting. So you don't want to tell them, shut up. So you let them speak, and then you listen to the music. Because it's too exhausting to listen to what they say, and you just listen to the music, and you look at them nicely. So that's a general idea with the bodily sensations. You are indifferent. You see, it's because what a detail in what you told me seemed, I can never be certain, but seemed to give away that you were busy with them, that you were attached. It's a form of attachment. If you want to get rid of something, you're attached to that. You see, attachment is not just that you want to keep. Attachment is being busy involved with. You see?
I don't feel like I've been trying to get rid of them, but I have been trying to
change them, manipulate.
Well, I'm wanting them to all be at the same level of indifference or non. But it's not like another example that I can
analogy that I can give is when you are tired, you are about to fall asleep, and you have thoughts that come, but you are kind of too tired to follow, you see, and the sensations in the body also. So you let go, you know, you let go. So that's the same idea.
Very helpful.
It's kind of unavoidable in the beginning because, in the beginning and also, because if we move from a situation in which we were not aware of the sensations, then we discover a whole zoo.
Yes.
Yeah, a whole zoo. So then we become interested in the tiger, in the all these exotic animals that we were not accustomed to seeing in our latitudes.
It's kind of like the moment in Wizard of Oz when they go from black and white to color. You know, that, I mean, I just never contemplated the sensations, and it's a little too fascinating.
Now, there are tricks, because when you engage too much with the sensation, the problem with the localization in the body, for instance, as we focus on an area of the body, it will trigger local contraction. It will trigger a local heightened activity, physical activity, actually. So then, once this process has been set in motion, the thing becomes more visible, and then attract even more attention. So we give more attention, we create even more contraction locally, you see? So it's a kind of self-amplifying process. So when we notice that has happened, it is interesting to make a deliberate effort to change, to focus on a different area of the body.
To focus on a different area.
Yeah. For instance, if the attention is too much on the forehead, that happens often, to direct the attention more towards the back of the head. If the attention is too much on the torso, to direct the attention towards the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, for instance.
But if the directive is to
I said
experience the totality.
I said that's a trick. When we have been too much involved, then we have boarded the train, which has left the station, right? And because we have created this zone of activity in the body, and the more obvious it becomes, the more we focus onto it, the more we focus, the more obvious it becomes. So in order to get out of this circle, then we can make the deliberate, temporary attempt to focus on something else. Or you may also get up and have a beer or something like that. So remember, benevolent indifference. Benevolent means you let things come in, you don't try to kill anything, but indifference, you let, be and let be.
Very helpful, thank you.
Francis,
Just a second.
Sure. Hopefully I can articulate this, because I think you've been talking about it in many respects. In terms of inquiry or investigation, I've noticed a tendency, more and more investigations are coming not from, you know, a controlled experiment or, you know, condition-based, and I want to look at something, but are coming out of very spontaneous, not planned ahead, don't even know necessarily what I'm looking for, but something has occurred, whether it's, I don't know, habitual energy of some sort, a contraction, something that just doesn't feel right, and it just requires a looking, but it's not a scientific per se investigation. But then again, there's no strings less strings attached as well. Is that kind of like what you're getting at in terms of the indifferent, just the looking sometimes? Well, there's a strong sense of.
She was referring to what we do in the yoga, right?
Yeah.
This form of somehow a little artificial form of meditation or contemplation of the body. As a technique, the goal of this activity is to realign our experience of the world and of the body, to experience them as a seamless continuum. So that involves reprogramming patterns of perception. The investigation is a slightly different aspect, although this could be also conceived as experiments that are naturally then part of the investigation. But the investigation centers around one single question. Is consciousness real? Is consciousness a reality? In other words, remember, reality is that which cannot not exist. So I don't see very well what you mean when you say these experiments that come without much investment into them.
I wasn't specifically referring to the yoga, just in general. Like an inquiry into not knowing what you're inquiring into. Just a looking without quite sure what you're looking for, but there's a drive to look, that just a sense that, you know, something here, but without an agenda, without, you know, just a sense of looking, without any parameters or.
Yes. Yeah. You know, there is a moment we don't have hard questions that we want to ask from reality. reality has already answered a lot of our questions. So, but at some point, however, remember that during the investigation period, the way we investigated was to conduct experiments into the nature of self by changing the way we act, we think, we perceive, we believe, we interact, trying to do those from an impersonal perspective. In fact, this experimentation, instead of coming to a stop, becomes more and more constant. In other words, because we naturally tend to act, believe, behave, etc., from an impersonal perspective. You see, so our life becomes a constant field of experimentation, but it becomes so natural that we don't even think I am conducting an experimentation. And moreover, it's not really an experimentation because we don't have any question. Right? We don't have any question. We are just acting that which used to be conducting experiments, asking questions. The question has kind of been answered, at least for the mind. Nevertheless, we keep conducting the experiment because we get always the same beautiful confirmation. And then, at that moment, we have moved from the investigation to the celebration.
Yes.
You see? And so there is not a line in the sand that we cross when we move from one to the other. In fact, we go back and forth, but at some point we find ourselves more in the celebration territory than in the investigation territory, but we cross the line in the sand quite often.
I guess I'm stuck in the clouds with the witches and stuff a little bit. Would you say the pattern recognition is a function of mind? That where you see it's amorphous and then you start to make something out. That's mind at work?
I think everything that a computer can do is a function of mind.
Okay. So now we're skiing and it's good. It's a nice day. We come over a rise and we feel a turn that we're going to make on this slope. There's no thinking going on. Is that mind? And there's a third part of this. I got another.
I think we see ourselves already ahead with our tactile body. We carve.
Yeah.
We see the line and
yeah.
And we carve this thing, and then we know already over there
right.
when we are going to reverse, you know.
Yeah. So that's yeah. You can feel it, can't you? Okay. Now, yeah. Ooh, nice. Ooh, the edge just right. So then, a weird thing happens if you crash going pretty fast. That's an interesting place.
Yeah, that's why I used to wear a helmet.
Yeah, I never did, which is that's the problem. But when you crash, there's this kind of, it's interesting, it's timeless.
For a while.
For a while, yeah, just for a while. Well, you know, do you know what I mean? That crash, when it's just, you know something bad's about to happen. Yeah. Time slows and all of that.
Then you end up at the resort doctor's office.
You're in a toboggan, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something about your question, Dylan, made me want to, where, it's like there's a sliding scale And you talk about transparent motion.
I see, yes. I mean, there is so much enjoyment in this line that you project yourself, but I think you feel the oneness with the snow, with the contact with the snow, with your feet, and the trajectory. It's there is something about trajectories, and that's what I love tennis and I love ski. I remember as a kid, the first time I watched tennis players, good tennis players, and I saw these trajectories. Wow! You know, and then that's why I went in the missile business later on.
Just like tennis, sort of. You know. And then, if the motion is transparent, you know, as you say, I just noticed it because I cross country ski now, and there's this. No. Oh no, skate skiing. It is the coolest thing. It's like, it's so beautiful, and I realized when I do it well, it's transparent.
It's like effort to me.
There's no effort. You don't even notice it. But anyway, okay, somebody might know.
Already this
no.
thing.
Oh no! I'll show you a video anyway. But I guess I'm just curious about that. You know, because I get it with trajectories. It's the same thing. It's like it's not like thinking though.
I'm a virgin with this type of skiing, and I think I remain.
You've never? Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so anyway. Yeah. It's effortless, but anyway. Okay. I mean,
yes. My son did the Mont Blanc. I told you, Mont Blanc, and it involves, you know, going. Climbing halfway, then going to bed at 7 p.m., waking up at 1 o'clock to finish the ascension.
No effort, right? None.
With the skis on your back, you know. And then yes, thank you. Thank you. I stick to carving in blue runs. That's
Francis, that will that conducts.
What?
That will that conducts the experience in the investigation is the awareness, the consciousness, universal consciousness that we are. In that sense, when we are open to a benevolent for all that happens, we are just in consciousness in this moment. In this sense, it's not an experience, it's not an investigation, it's just life. It's just the transparency of life in I am.
Yes.
Yes.
When in the absence of feeling and believing to be a limited consciousness, it's just beautiful life. Now it's just a comment, not just something you said, a trigger. So often people ask, but if the ego is conducting the investigation, how can the ego have access to consciousness? And the mistake in this question is that they are positing that there is an ego in the first place. So of course, if you make the declaration that there is an ego, how can you get rid of the belief that there is an ego? So we have to understand that ignorance is simply the belief that there is an ego, And that this belief which has to be questioned. And ignorance is not that there is an ego that exists and that has to disappear. And it requires the understanding that since there is no such a thing as a limited consciousness, a non-existent entity cannot do anything. A non-existent limited consciousness cannot perceive, cannot decide, cannot think, cannot do, cannot act, cannot interact, cannot do anything. Because it doesn't exist in the first place. So that's very simple. A non-existent entity cannot do anything. So that which does, that which thinks, that which perceives is consciousness, but not a limited consciousness. The only consciousness there is not limited. That's the point.
Thank you.
I just want to check something that you said a little earlier, Francis. And I'm thinking about a number of my friends who are therapists, and a few of them I think might even be watching this retreat. And so when you said about when you put your attention or engaging too much with the sensation, heightens the activity, and you said it's even a sense amplifier. In the West, we have a lot of forms of therapy that seem to be exactly that. You know, focusing right in on the sensation. And definitely, the effect is amplifying it. It seems to be a belief going along with it that helps to dissipate perhaps the intensity of a habitual contraction, et cetera, et cetera. But you said that, and I thought, maybe that just goes, nope, to a large portion of that field. What do you think?
You see, the alchemists, they have this formula, solve and coagulate, meaning to coagulate and to dissolve. In fact, it would be rather in this order, that in the beginning, if you're not aware of your body, the first step, of course, is to become aware of the sensations. But then, once they have to let them, to give them the freedom to evolve, but that's when the benevolence is to let them in. But then the indifference is to give them the freedom to leave. So they have the freedom to come, but they also have the freedom to leave. You know? So to coagulate means to come, to leave. If you will, if you take the three gunas in India, you know, tamas, rajas, and sattva. In the tamasic state, these contractions in the body are not even perceived. They are hidden. Yeah. We are escaping them. So when we become aware of the body, we move from tamas to rajas. They become perceived. So in that sense, there is a useful aspect, you know, in this first moment, moving from a state of apathy to a state of agitation. Mm-hmm. But then the second step, moving from rajas, agitation, to sattva, peace, harmony, requires the indifference. Yeah. So the benevolence to let them in, not to suppress, the indifference to let them out. Yeah. So there is a part of truth in that, mm-hmm. but it shouldn't be focused and it shouldn't be manipulative.
Right, right. Because I see a pattern I worry about sometimes, which is people then talk about their past in a way that's even more real. You know, it's things that have happened, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems as though sometimes the therapy seems to have strengthened a kind of a story rather, rather than dissipated.
And even in the body, I followed, you know, the Shaktipat, you know, this type of thing. There are paths that, of course, belong to the progressive path, in which some agitation, some movement is created in the body, or is noticed in the body. And then there is a belief that a purification takes place through the repetition of this movement. I have my doubt about this thing. I follow for a while a Japanese teacher on such a path. And the sessions were quite extraordinary, because you had a group of 100 people in a room or 50 people in a room, and each had their specific spiel. You know, there was one guy who was silent, and from time to time sitting, and from time to time he would go, there was another one that was doing something like that, and there was another one who was speaking in tongues, language that we don't understand, and each had his own thing. So you'd enter this thing, you could. It was really a zoo, you see. So I had my own thing, but I don't remember. It was something some oscillation in the spine. No, I am going to tell you a story. I apologize for those who have heard it already 10 times. I apologize, but it's too good a story for so. That's a dessert for the rookies. Okay. Then, the way I started with this teacher, at the time I was staying that was my first summer with Jean Klein. I was staying with them in their cottage in Switzerland. But before that, I had attended the Krishnamurti talks and in Zaanen, and I was living in Gstaad in some macrobiotic bed and breakfast. And I had left, I don't remember, but I had left a suitcase there. So at some point I drove back to Zaanen, to Gstaad, go to that place, had dinner there, and there was a group with this teacher. And for dinner, I was seated at the same table of the teacher. I asked him about this thing, and then he invited me to participate at the session after the dinner, which I did. And I was astonished that this movement started in me. So that was weird. So it felt that something very tangible. So then, and so the same night I drove back, and then I am with Jean Klein at his place, and there were four of us: Yvonne, the American cook, Francis, and an older guy who was a physicist, and there was Jean Klein and his companion. And Jean Klein and his companion left for Geneva. They had some things to do. And then I mentioned with these friends the experience I had the night before. And they say, okay, why don't we try to do it? So we did, because there was some protocol to follow, you know, some pressure points on the head, and then blowing in a certain way into the back of your partner. Anyway. So we do a session, you know, when the cat is away. So we do this session, and okay, my movement starts. I don't remember the movement of these two friends, Ivan, the young guys, Ivan and the American cook. And but the older guys, the physicist, nothing happens. But the other one, they had some movement. And so then after that, after the session, we debrief each other about ours, and we ask the guy, nothing happened. Oh, no, that's no, there. No, the movement of the guy was very, no, he had a movement. It was very weird, his movement. His movement was, So then we said, your movement was not very spontaneous. He said, that was not my movement. My movement was my balls were going up and down, up and down. Yeah, I was pointing at them. So, no more questions? You have sent a question on my email.
Hey, so since consciousness is universal and always in the background as peace, it seems to me to imply that the difference between a human being that's in ignorance and one that's not in ignorance is the body-mind configuration, which seems to imply that it's actually the body that gets liberated. Is that a useful or true perspective?
In your question, you see the body as an entity that can be liberated, free or not free. There is nobody and no entity who is in fact subjected to ignorance. Ignorance is one of the many ways reality manifests through a human body-mind instrument. But it is not the instrument that chooses or manifests ignorance. It's reality that manifests ignorance through an instrument of its choosing. Because ignorance is a choice made by reality, by consciousness.
So consciousness is ignorant.
consciousness, it's like when you watch a movie and you make the decision to kind of believe a little bit the story in the movie in order to enjoy the movie. Would you say that you are in the movie? No. Would you say that you really believe the movie? No. You just make this choice, and you enjoy the ups and downs that come with the choice you have made. You enjoy the ride.
Thank you.
But at every moment while watching the movie, whenever you choose to do so, you can reach for the Coke and for the potato chips, which relaxes you. So consciousness has a choice. We have the choice at every moment to relax out of the movie. But some of us are so interested in the movies that they don't want to relax. They want to really suffer. They relax only at the end of the movie. But during my mother was like that. She would cry throughout the movie because she believed it was true. And so she wouldn't go to movies.
Sometimes I would say I really relaxed, and the body and the mind seem content. So I wonder, why do you think, if the whole system seemed to approve of being in relaxation, why would there be so much resistance other times, or most of the time, to relax? It seems like it should be easy.
When we choose to believe to be a separate entity, relaxation is impossible. Because we are in a situation of impending doom. Real relaxation is not a decision that we can make as an individual. Real relaxation is something that happens naturally as a result of our invulnerability as consciousness. And now sometimes the body is tense, for instance in the chair, in the dentist's chair. Rightfully so, because dentists are mean. They are not as bad as urologists. they are the worst. Urologists, no. Okay. So you send me a question. That's one from Mary. Okay. Mary says, I made a list recently of all the items I need rather than having them on my mind. After week 1 of the retreat, I decided to change the title of my shopping list to Impersonal Wish List. Would this suffice in having the right intention? And she adds, serious question. Well, Mary, if from the bottom of your heart, you truly believe that the best you can do to be impersonal, then that suffices. To change the name, if that's the best you can do, that will suffice, because the impersonal action is the one that simply comes from our goodwill, from our doing our best to be impersonal. And then that will make it impersonal. So, yes, whatever you do in your own counsel, that you feel is the best you do to make an impersonal decision or an impersonal wish. But I'm sure in your case, Mary, a lot of your wishes are impersonal. So, Patricia asks, can you please talk about ultimate safety? Consciousness is ultimately safe. Consciousness is not affected by its creation. If it were affected, it could change it immediately, but it cannot be affected. In the same way as a mirror is not stained or destroyed by the reflections that appear in it. The mirror is unaffected. The reflections come and go. The passers-by in the street in front of the mirror, they pass by. The mirror is not affected, doesn't take their shape, their color is not destroyed. So the consciousness is this transparent mirror of the soul, not affected. Moreover, the reality is eternal. It is the only thing which is eternal, because it is its own cause. Everything else has a cause. Everything else has a beginning and an end. But consciousness, reality, when consciousness is seen, understood as reality in its understood, experienced in its reality dimension, then it is experienced also in its immortality dimension. Now, that's why my definition of consciousness is very important. I use the word reality. Consciousness is the reality hearing these words right now. So it's not the mind. It is the reality which is hearing these words. And this reality, since we are hearing these words, this reality is our reality. And therefore, this reality is our real identity. Therefore, consciousness is our real identity. And our real identity is invulnerable and immortal, and therefore ultimate safety. And because it's ultimate safety, we can relax. Luciana, when I first heard about non-duality, I thought it was a fairy tale. And I thought that experiencing the world as unreal would entail stripping it from its beauty and complexity. But now I can see that I could not have been more wrong. In effect, and paradoxically, it is as if our true nature, spontaneous creation, is more real in its unreality than the dual reality I believed it to be. But what actually surprises me the most is the way in which even an incomplete change of perspective has already influenced the perception of my surroundings and hence my responses to them. I feel so much lighter and I am becoming more spontaneous every day. Something I like, yet it's completely different to the way I was. I must say I no longer feel a lot of compassion, but I don't need to anyway. It comes quite natural to help and be with others, even though I no longer take anything and anyone too much seriously like I did before. What an incredible life-changing philosophy Advaita is. Speaking about spontaneity, could we say that it is what makes possible for a body-mind to become what you called the servant of the Absolute? Yes. And isn't this also a sort of being knowingly in meditation? Yes. By the same token, could we also say that all that arises out of ignorance is also a kind of servant of the Absolute, but in an indirect way? Sort of. Perhaps we could call it a disservant of the Absolute by coining a word, right? Disservant doesn't exist in English, no? But it makes sense, right? Disservice, disservant, disservant of the Absolute. And perhaps we can call that being unknowingly in meditation. Yes. Yes, all beings are in meditation, some knowingly, most of them unknowingly. Yes, thank you, Luciana. I've answered your questions. Liana, there are times there is a knowing of birds flying up in the sky, and the literal sensation, even they are very far away, or the objects become transparent, and as if one can feel the life in them, like trees or even house walls. Is this the expansion of awareness? Well, if you take LSD, they can even become more alive. There is a feedback from some trees, for example, literally feeling a touch of kind of energy or even love. It feels I can silently talk to all from trees to birds, squirrels, and sometimes even chairs. Yes, the world, the universe is our body. And animals and trees, they are very impersonal. And we have this natural connection with them. And also nature. I mean, we walk in the trees, we walk in nature, and even the big trees, they don't take themselves to be big shots. So that's beautiful. Nobody. So that places you in the right place in the universe. I like, the Chinese paintings. You have the big mountains, the big tree, and the little fisherman on the little boat on the lake. You see, so beautiful because it replaces man in the true perspective in nature, and there's something else I wanted to say, but it has left without being said. There was another question from Liana. I can resonate with what they say, that sometimes we have judgments and it's painful when we see us doing that. On the other hand, other times, being perfectly calm, I see myself being firm with someone without having anything against them, rather addressing a behavior, let's say, or something that is not okay. Most of the times, in hindsight, I can see this as having been necessary at that time. There is a nuance here, isn't it? Yes, there is, absolutely. Absolutely. But even in such a case, what is important is not to judge the person. It's okay to judge the behavior. But even it's not okay to say the behavior was bad. It was simply that the behavior was coming from ignorance. In other words, they acted like that because they didn't know better. You see? So, in the order of, say, you're a bad person, you're stupid, then that's extremely judgmental. Say, this action was bad, that's less judgmental, but it's not diplomatic. Say, this action comes from a misunderstanding about your true nature, can be misunderstood by the other party. So the real beautiful way was what my teacher used to say. He would tell such a person, oh, this action was not like you. It's so beautiful because he was pointing at the consciousness and that this, which they are, and hinting at the fact that this action was not coming from the consciousness they are. You see, it was very beautiful. This action is not like you. But sometimes he would just yell at people. So Mary says about, she had asked a question about, remember the third eye. She said, thankful for your clarifying response. She said it was literally an eye-opener. I had not considered the third eye as an open active energy center. This released and freed up a lot of static energy. I guess the natural state to be for the most part relaxed and free, contracting as a person just puts artificial blockages in the way. And then the question, is there a particular way to release and stay more in the flow of experience? In this case, by just dropping a false idea of debugging a myth seems to do part of the job. Yes. To be in the flow of experience, feel that the universe around you is the extension, the continuation of your body. Just get used to that experience in the stillness of your house, you know, in your bedroom, in your living room, wherever, so that that becomes quite natural. And once you have that, you have this new skill, then take it to the world. Take it to your interaction with your sister, with other people. See whether you can maintain the same feeling of oneness, of being non-localized, when the situation in life become a little more stringent. That's it here. Thank you.